Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dice Commando YouTube channel. I'm Andrew, with you here as always. This is the Commando Cast, a video cast about all things Star Wars Destiny. This video and others like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. Please show your support with a like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell notification icon so you don't miss any new videos. If you want to get involved with the channel, consider becoming a channel member. There are many benefits to channel membership, including access to our Discord, exclusive deck tech and strategy videos, and the opportunity to help create channel content. I want to sincerely thank all our channel members, as I truly couldn't do this without your support. You guys rock. Go Commando. Hello everyone, welcome to the Commando Cast. I'm Andrew with you here as always, and happy Faltering Allegiances release day. Super exciting. The set file dropped at 9 o'clock last night. My time, midnight last night. Either way, it doesn't matter what time. It is out, and we have a whole weekend, well actually a whole week of events in front of us. It's very, very exciting. So, as continuing with tradition, what I usually do on release day is I want to pause and just kind of take a look at the decks that I think will be valid and kind of flying around in the early meta. Hello everyone, thank you for joining me again for episode 124, Decks for the Faltering Allegiances New Meta. So before we get into this, I just, basically the way we're going to do this today is I'm going to go through first a lot of the existing decks that are valid that I think are still going to have weight going forward. Then I want to go into the decks with the new stuff, and by that I mainly mean new characters, right? So to be clear, that doesn't mean that the old decks aren't going to have new cards in them. In fact, most of them are going to have to, because obviously we're on rotation, right, which is significant here. So it just keep that in mind, right? When I say it's an old deck, that doesn't mean it's not being changed. It just means that the framework of it, the idea of it, is relatively well established already. And the new stuff is obviously using the new characters to get, it's completely different in that case. And the second disclaimer is I'm shooting this earlier in the week because that's how this works, right? And so far we've seen at least a spoiler release per day, if not multiple spoiler drops per day, and we haven't yet seen the full set. So I'm working with, about a half of a set at this point, and there's an excellent chance, certainly by the time that you're viewing this, the whole set will have been dropped, and we'll have seen it all. And but my point is, I'm doing this early in the week, so there may be even bigger stuff that drops later this week that's not in here, but either way, I still think the decks that I'm going to present today are still going to be valid for the new meta. Oh, and before we get into this, I forgot another thing, right? I wanted to explain kind of my mindset for a lot of these decks. So I'm in love with this card that we're showing right now, Kamino Cloning Facility. This card is crazy good. This is one of the first cards that I think is potentially way above power curve. I've been assured that it's not, and I've been told that people have beat decks that are playing it, and that's not a surprise considering what it takes to get in there. I just think that this card's really, really, really good. So a lot of my decks are kind of focused in on, or a lot of the ones I'm proposing are focused in on that, not just because I think it's good, but because I think a lot of other people think it's good as well, right? So when I'm looking at a lot of these decks, it's not just what necessarily I would play, but also decks that I think people will also be playing, and I think that because the huge focus is on Kamino Cloning Facility, at least right now, I think that I wouldn't be surprised that we see a lot of people trying to make it work. So first, let's go into my expected carryovers from the previous meta into this one. Right, the first one, I think this is probably the most obvious. I think this is the one I think everybody agrees on, is Papa Palpatine. He doesn't lose a whole lot, right? Most of his big power tools, almost all of his partners that I've seen, in fact, I think all of his partners that I've seen him with are from Convergence Block, so he doesn't lose anything there. The majority of his tools are still with him from Convergence Block as well. I think we talked about before, he loses Force Jump, maybe some other onesie twosie stuff, but I think the majority of his stuff is there. So I think Papa Palp stays pretty relevant. I think Palp Watto's probably the best position to just keep on trucking. Reap's still a thing, big upgrades are still a thing, rolling them in multiple times is still a thing. So I think Pop-Up Help's pretty well positioned to still continue to do well in the meta. Next is this one's not a specific pairing but a group, and I'm just calling it closing in bounty hunters. I still think that Boba Jango, it loses Entangle, which is kind of a big deal, but it keeps Reversal because Reversal was a convergence block reprint. It has Slave 1 still, right? I mean, I think Boba Jango closing in is good. I think Dengar Asajj closing in is still good. I mean, that was making waves before. And, various pairings thereof, right? But specifically those two. I wouldn't even be surprised. I mean, and this isn't a closing in pairing, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see IG-88 still sticking around. Like, him and Dengar wasn't bad. Again, losing Entangle is kind of a big deal. And then I'm not really counting this guy in this group, but don't, of course, forget the Trandoshan, right? He's technically a bounty hunter. I'm not really counting him in the closing in group, but Trandoshan is a thing as well, right? The next deck that I think is going to be good, at least early, or at least somebody's going to try it early is I know, guys, I'm sorry, right? But Hoth Ewoks, I still think that's a thing. They don't lose all that many tools. Like, they lose Diplomatic Protection, which is actually significant. You can slot in Standoff if you want there. I mean, it's clearly not as good. And yes, they lose some tools, but they also get that rocket launcher, which is like the Ewok dream, right? And they have action cheats. Instigate is still there. Ewok Ambush is still there. So I don't think you count these guys out. Don't forget, of course, that one of the things keeping Ewoks in check was Anakin FC, and FC's being banned. So that'll definitely have an impact to kind of help these guys maybe get a little bit of a resurgence. I don't know. We'll have to see. I mean, now that Saw's out there, maybe something else is going to happen. But in terms of the indirect. But I think these guys. I think there's going to be people trying to make this work with a rocket launcher for sure. Next is Reylo. Reylo did take a pretty significant hit in terms of the tools it lost. Crossguard, Ezra Saber, Dagger of Mortis, just to name the upgrades. Steadfast is a big blow, huge blow for them. Actually, that was a really, really good card for them that they lose. But they're still good. Like, Polarity itself is great. There's still enough cards out there to keep them entertained. They're going to pick up new stuff in these new forms. I don't know. We'll see how this all goes. Yeah, because we saw the forums yesterday, and I don't know if Shicho will be, the savior for Reylo or whatever. But they have tools, and I think they're very consistent and they're very synergistic. And I don't see people dropping Reylo. And then Jabba Watt Sentinel or Jaws. This deck's always been a really consistent support package. It's always kind of been in that tier 1-5, tier 1-1, whatever you want to call it, wherever you want to rate stuff. It's always been in that category, and this guy's just consistent. I mean, he's still Rainbow. It doesn't lose a whole lot of tools. You can still run Entourage package if you want. You got the new TIE Striker. I know some people love it, some people hate it, whatever. But there's still got Megas, and then you can even run Camino Gloaming Facility in this, right? Because they're running Megas and stuff like that. So, and you're resolving red dice in theory multiple times because of Wat Tambor. Don't forget the TIE Bomber in this deck. TIE Bomber with Wat Tambor is crazy good. Definitely don't count. In fact, I wouldn't even say don't count this out. I would say look for this. Like, I think Jabba Watt Sentinel's pretty good. So yeah, that kind of caps off my. I'm sure there's. I don't have Trandoshans on here, or I didn't. I'll talk about Trandoshans a bit now. I still think that they're a threat. They have pretty low health, so I think that that's probably going to get solved with an aggro deck, because I expect to see. Well, you'll obviously see what I expect to fly around, but I think that the Trandoshans probably won't do great early. But we will have to see. Hey guys, I am back. You'll notice I'm obviously doing a second shoot here. That's because this morning the Tiny Grimes video dropped with some massive cards. That was quite an honor for him to get those plots, because they really rounded out our team. So I wanted to make sure that I addressed the two big pre-builts, right? We started off way back. The first spoilers we saw were Jyn, and then led right into Cassian. And then Saw was really the second character spoiler we saw. And now we have those teams rounded out. So I don't think it's any secret that those will probably be heavily favored in the early meta, right? I can't imagine them not being a huge component of the tournament this weekend. So first up, we have Saw's Renegades. Obviously, Saw and then the -1 plot allows him to play with the 2 partisans. It's a big deal. It really increases his health pool significantly, right? Now you're not looking at some weird Jawa or Ewok type thing. You just have 28 health out of the gate. Now that 28 health is definitely a buffer, right? It's not real 28 health because of the way Saw works, but that's a buffer that he needs significantly. And then the partisan, we had always kind of, or at least for me, I'd kind of thought it maybe wasn't that good. We were kind of wondering where all the cards were coming from, and now we understand that you start with 6 extra cards because of that plot. And I think that people will be trying this deck out for sure. I mean, it's very cool, very unique. Saw's he's very interesting, and I think a lot of people are going to want to see him. The next deck, of course, is the Jyn Cassian Intel, Jyn Cassian Intel, Jyn Cassian Spies, whatever we decide to call it. I'm leaning towards Jyn Cassian Intel. Now for this deck, we don't even know yet because as of the time I'm shooting this, which is probably already out of date now again, we haven't seen most of the yellow intels that he would in theory bring. But with that plot today with the -1 that obviously works with them and then synergizes with Cassian's PA, that's pretty good, right? So this deck went from detect. This deck I think is a contender. I don't see any way this deck's not getting a ton of play on the release weekend. I mean, it's not only is it obvious, but it's synergistic and it looks really strong. It might be really, really, really strong. So I mean, I'm sure the guys have tested it, and I'm sure that with everything out there, it's balanced. I'm not worried about that. It just looks real good. So I don't see people not on this one this weekend. Alright, so my first early meta deck is Kamino Phasma, and this comes with a disclaimer, of course, referring, and yes, I was, in the previous, the standalones, this should, or the carryovers, I mean, this should actually count as a carryover, but it doesn't. I don't have it as that, and the reason is because of the Kamino Clothing Facility, right? You're really playing this one, like this deck, granted, it's mostly just the same that it always was, right? Phasma IDT, and then instead you can't play Retribution anymore, so now you play United We Stand, the 1-point, the elite version. And you're basically adding in whatever sexy stuff drops from the new set and the cloning facility. I mean, the list that I'm showing here is, I mean, it's really pretty vanilla. Like, there's not a whole lot of super high tech in here. It's just good stuff. This deck does take a hit losing logistics, that's for sure, so we'll have to see if there's an equivalent backfill or something like that in the new set when we get the full list. I wouldn't be surprised if there is, but I don't know. Maybe they're trying to keep the ramp down. I don't know. I do think that might be a mistake because I think keeping the ramp down might just make the decks that currently ramp well better, right? Because logistics is kind of ubiquitous, or I should say it's kind of versatile, and then it can be spread around. It's neutral. Anyway. So yeah, this deck, it's low on upgrades, just the A300 for redeploy. The reason I do have the A300 in there is because it provides 2 sides for the Death Trooper power action, because he's obviously going to be your last guy. We've got conscripts, the Imperial Officer. Remember, the Imperial Officer is a leader. You get that question a lot when people see Mega Blaster still rolling in after Phasma goes down. That's the point of the officer, right? It's your secondary leader. VPD, Viper Pro Droid, Mega Blasters, of course, and then Kamino. I mean, you're resolving a ton of red dice here. I think Kamino can be pooping out Death Troopers pretty aggressively here. As far as events, again, it's a pretty vanilla list. Sinister Piece, Face the Enemy. Focus Fire is amazing in this. Do remember you have to resolve them as ranged, but you don't have like Quicksilver Baton or anything weird in here, so it's really one and the same. I do have Force Compliance. I like this card in this deck. I like it more in the Advanced Training version because you can flip to a blank. Force Compliance would be one of those, though, that you would want to swap out for something better in this new set. Measure for Measure, Pulverize, again, this just helps you with the early, right? I mean, you see it all the time. You can roll out Phasma, Death Trooper flip, you can swing for 9, right? It's not that difficult to do. The Route, of course, and then Best Defense, because that was Convergence Replan. So that's the Phasma list. I do think you're going to see a number of people playing Phasma just because they're excited about Kamino, and that's really why I included it in this set. All right, so this pairing I think is, at least if, from what I've been playing around with, it seems to me to be the best way to play FN Elite in terms of being versatile and trying to basically not make him your only tool, right? And in fact, I think if you're playing FN Elite, I think one of the greatest things he brings to the table isn't just the multiple die he rolls in, but it's the fact that he kind of determines your target, right? He's kind of like Fives, and then he's one of those guys that they want to kill first, I think, anyway. Right now, he only gets the one roll in, so maybe he's not as much of a threat. But this pairing I've come up with, Infus FN, it works. It's exactly 30. We've seen Infus she gained a lot of popularity after the Holocron update, where she got dropped in points 17, right? For obvious reasons, because there's a lot of 13s that went with her. We've seen her with Krennic, we've seen her with K2SO, we've seen, I was playing her for a bit with Fives FC, I mean, just for the money. So let's go through this. I actually do think this one has legs, but there's paper, and then there's actually getting it on the table, right? So we have the Electro Ripper, that's a weapon. Do note here that we have 10 upgrades, which seems light, right? But you have the FN ability, and remember, it's not the old FN. It's not overwrite. It is a power action. So you really just effectively need the one weapon on him to at least get him off early game, and then you can start dumping stuff over onto Infus, quite frankly, or see who your target is and start dumping them over. So we have the Electro Ripper. I did include 2 of the batons. I think the baton's good, but I'm also just kind of having fun with it early, because that's how you find out if things are good or not, right? Grievance Striker. Grievance Striker is an amazing upgrade that is still, I think, highly underrated. 2 for that redeploy with no pay sides, no modified sides. It's really good. Pulse Cannon in here, right? Really, Pulse Cannon with FN doesn't seem bad, and then pulling it back and then Pulse Cannoning, I mean, that's crazy to me. Riot Shield, of course, and then Sonic Detonators, which are arguably the best. I don't think arguably, I think that's probably pretty clearly the best one for FN, because you love all the sides, right? Because remember, you have to resolve it when you roll it in. So then we go to the supports. I am running Camino again. Maybe not. Maybe you can find a better slot for it. Mega Blaster Troopers, Viper Probe Droid, Sinister Piece, Desperate Measures, Electroshock, Measure for Measure, Reap, Shields are down, Best Defense. Now you will notice there are no hero cards in this deck. I'm kind of just holding that slot. There's some stuff that like Shields are down, for example, is a card that we could very easily take away, right? I mean, I'm just saying, depending on what we see in the set, at the very least, you could move in Feat of Strength or something like that, which is the hero card. That's all I can think of right now, just off my head and kind of in the world. But there's definitely improvements that can be made once we see the full list. There's no doubt in my mind there's going to be some hero cards we wouldn't mind playing in this list, right? So anyway, this is just my stab at the FN version of him Elite, but I think the Enfys one brings a lot to the table with how she can reap, make the money, and then be a threat on her own. Alright, next I have another FN deck. So this is FN Jango. Before we get fully into, I'm showing the deck list now, but before we get fully into it, let's go ahead and, well, there was some debate, and there still is debate, and I'm not sure over whether it should be FN Jango or FN Boba. And then closing in, of course, right? So it's a 1-to-1 whether you go FN or Boba. What makes it interesting is the decks are very similar in terms of dead space, right? You have to run your bounties, and question of how many bounties you run with Boba, I don't, maybe 5 or 4. But that's one the complaint with Boba is that you're running the bounties. The complaint with Jango is that you're running equipment, which doesn't help FN, right? So both of them equivalently are roughly one and the same in terms of the dead slots for the other character, if you will. But they both help get money, and when I'm thinking about it, I like the Jango. I think I like, and like I keep hopping back and forth, but I think I like the Jango version because I think FN's going to be the target, And there's nothing worse than an in-game Jango with like a whole bunch of stuff on him who can back-to, right? That stinks to play against. So then if they go for Jango first, and you have that Finn out, and like I think it's a who can actually back to himself for probably 2 or 3 by the time you get done with it. So I don't, and by the time you get through the riot shields and all that, like you've had a bad day. So I think that's why I like the Jango version. The Boba version's certainly more aggro, right? If you get out and you can knock somebody down and then Boba rolls in a couple times, like your opponent's going to be in a bad spot. But it's a little more like if you have a bad early game and you just get unlucky, like you're probably screwed. And granted, you're probably screwed anyway. But all right, so enough chat on that. Let's get into the list as proposed. Again, there could be some cooler stuff that comes out in the set. I'm not married to much of this, but I have the A300 blaster for redeploy. I have armor plating for equipment. We have bounty hunter mask for the obvious free money equipment. I mean, plus the health doesn't stink. I do only have one riot baton in this. I've got a grievance striker. I have 2 pulse cannons. That'll go on Jango. Well, I mean, you put it where it needs to go, but likely it's going on Jango. 2 riot shields and then 2 sonics. Sonics are obviously FN's dream. I don't have any upgrades for events I have sent. So you could Camino here too, I guess, if you wanted to. I don't think it necessarily works as well. And then also looking at this list, what I realized is that I left off DM. I think if you're playing yellow villain, you certainly need DM because Camino, right? So Sinister Piece back to EMP. Actually, I totally swap in the EMP slot. Electroshock, measure for measure, route, shields are down, and best defense. And there again, there's a lot of pseudo inefficient choices because we lost a lot in the last set, right? Normally I'd probably run an Entangle here with Jango and his money making ability, but that's obviously rotated out. So again, there's plenty of room here for improvement as the set continues to develop. But I think the basic framework is here in that you have equipment to help make the money for the weapons. Yeah, so that's pretty much this one. Alright, so moving into a hero pairing, and this is one that we've already seen out there a bit. I know it was played, well, a whole bunch of stuff's been played on Destiny Junior. Doesn't necessarily mean they own it, right? But that's the first place I saw this one, and it makes complete sense, actually. And you will actually notice that if you look at the Cal, right, so Dice Commando Standard CM Cal, that's actually an overwrite on mine because, and it says clone. I used my Mace Wookiee Tribe framework to clone this and then just swapped in and out the stuff that wasn't legal anymore and made sense. So I am playing Abandoned Refinery as a battlefield here. I think that makes sense with what you're trying to do and getting the right upgrades on Cal at the right time. I could end up being wrong, but I don't see any other battlefield that's like super great for him anyway. So I think you run the Refinery. This one does come out to being, remember, you can't in the DB, you still can't do the Elite Warrior, but it's obviously an Elite Warrior that takes you to 29. Wait, is that right? 15, 11. All right, well, either way. So, yeah, it comes out 20. So, all right. So, point here is you just try to keep Cal alive until he becomes a beat stick. I mean, there's not a lot of strategy to this deck other than just get the stuff that you needed at the right time. So going through the upgrades, there's a lot of upgrades in here. I mean, you're going to be doing upgrade overwriting. You'll notice the one that's missing in here that usually I love is Quicksilver Baton. It works great in the blue-red pairing, but there's no leader, so you don't get the extra roll in here. So it's not here. I mean, you can still run it because it's good, but you're not getting the roll in. You'd have to pay 1 to roll in the Wookiee die, which I think is probably not ideal unless it's in game, and who knows. So we've got Anakin's Saber. I have 2 BD1s because these are your equipment. I have 1 Cal Saber and 1 Jaro T'Pol Saber. I think Cal's Saber is actually pretty decent, but it's 3, and I don't know. We'll see. Jaro T'Pol now has redeploy, but it actually doesn't in this deck. Then have the Jedi Saber. Obviously the Jedi Saber's in here because why not? I have Neiman Mastery and Neiman Training. That's not because I'm trying to be cost effective on Mastery. I'm just trying to get more abilities out there. And then we have Yoda's Lightsaber again. That's a great, fantastic 1 cost. The events I think are really pretty vanilla here. Discipline Mind for removal. The 1 tech card is Draw Closer because we're playing Neiman package. So I think that can be really good, especially once Cal gets all beef sticked. Feat of Strength for removal. Both these guys have enough health to keep that on the line the whole time. Field Medic, Fluid or Pos, Measure, Nullify, Under Fire, Wookiee Rage. So there's the one thing is there's not a ton of redeploy in here. So you really like that's got me worried on how little redeploy there is. Especially like the abilities and stuff, but I mean the deck strategy is to turn Cal into a beast stick. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see this one this weekend. I think somebody's probably going to be bringing it. I think it's pretty well positioned. It has an effective bunch of health, right? At least in the early meta. We'll see how this one does. Alright, so this one is kind of a spicy little one that I came up with. I don't know if anybody else has played it or not, but I came up with this one on my own. I mean, I'm not saying I'm the first one that did. I'm just saying I came up with this one on my own, kind of like the Infus FN pairing. This one's very interesting to me. The whole point, I mean, not the whole point here, but we're playing Camino in this, which I think's big. And I think I'm not sure who you go for here, right? I mean, Jyn is a massive hand threat, but if you can shut down Fives with those rerolls, I think maybe you just hit the 9-point character. So I don't know. I think your opponent's gonna have to make a hard decision there, and eventually you can hopefully get out the Palace Guard. And remember, Jyn's a leader if for some reason you get the Palace. So do note, of course, on this team, right, the 2 Palace Guards are included only because of Camino. That's what I'm pointing out here. They would obviously be set aside. They're not on your team. But the idea is that he has Guardian while there's a leader out there, which is Jyn, so then he can start sucking up damage for her if she's out there. So the list I think is again pretty. There's not anything super exciting in this list. A300, it is Admiral. I did include You Are in Command Now in the events just in case we need to put it on Fives. I think that's not as great, but remember with his rerolls, he's super consistent. We have 1 Cassian's Blaster. That thing does have redeploy for everybody. So that's 3 redeploys in there. I have 2 copies of Jyn Erso's Blaster because it's #Amazeballs, especially on Jyn. And then 2 Riot Shields, which, yeah, blocks more on Fives, excuse me. But keep whoever alive you need to. Conscript Squad, so it's a little inefficient with Jyn goes down, but it's a good one. It's not a good, it's a great 1-drop. Cloning Facility. We have Feat of Strength, Field Medic, Focus Fire, because obviously this is all a bunch of guns. Measure for Measure, great with Fives. Rebel Assault, great, just easy removal when we have a lot of, right, I mean, it's non-damage removal, but great removal there when you have a whole bunch of guns on the table. We have Under Fire, you can throw it on, it's a red, right, deal to a red character, you can throw it on whoever you want to, or whoever isn't the target. And then, like I said, You Are in Command Now for a potential reset. So again, we could see some more neat stuff come out that would slot in here, but I think this deck's, I mean, it's just pretty straightforward aggro, right? It's 2 pretty decent characters. I mean, yeah, Fives doesn't have FC and everything going for him, but he still gets multiple rerolls on those clone dice. So we'll have to see how this fares. I think this one throws a lot of guns on the table pretty quick. Alright, so that's it for the deck lists I have today. Like I said, there's nothing super tech and sexy in there because, I mean, there's a lot of places, there's a lot of ways that this could go. I do think the FN Infus deck is actually pretty neat. That's something I'm looking forward to trying. The Jyn Fives deck I think will get bumped if we can find an effective 4-die Jyn Cassian or some version thereof, right? I mean, actually, there's an argument to be made that Jyn and Satine could be played together. I don't know. We will have to see, but this is super exciting. I mean, it's been a long time since we've had a field this wide open, not knowing what you're going to see in 3 to 4 days when you go to a tournament. I think that's pretty awesome. So please let me know what else you guys are excited about seeing. Again, don't get too hung up on the list because they're all going to change probably not only before I post this, but certainly after we see the full list. And by list, I mean don't get hung up on the onesie twosie cards, especially the events, right? Because that's mostly what we haven't seen. But instead, the general theory of the deck, because I still think the teams hold pretty solid. So anyway, let me know what you're excited. Thank you for joining me, and again, please enjoy this release this whole weekend. This is something that couple months ago we thought we'd never see again. So this is pretty exciting. So if nothing else, y'all, go Commando.